2018 has been a pretty solid year for films. And if you saw my 2018 best of list, then you know there were a few that weren't on everyone's radar. That also meant that when some of these bigger movies didn't quite live up to expectations, they took over a lot of the film conversations. So on this worst of 2018 list, many of the films that I'm listing had a lot of great potential and had the right idea and parts. They mainly just didn't land the execution. And again, everyone's list is going to be different, but these are my personal top 10 worst films of 2018. Some dishonourable mentions go to The Spy Who Loved Me, Peppermint, Hurricane Heist, Truth or Dare, and 1517 to Paris. Number 10, Mute. This film was a major disappointment. I'm a fan of Duncan Jones and his film Moon, which I think is one of the best science fiction films this century. So when I heard that Netflix were releasing his next film, set in the universe of Moon, I was ecstatic. Then I saw the film, which despite being beautiful to look at, kind of went nowhere, with characters that weren't interesting in the slightest, while the plot takes forever to decide what it wants to do. Scrap Alexander Skarsgård's character and the crap with his girlfriend, and just focus on Paul Rudd's character, who actually featured some range and depth. This film just didn't know what story it wanted to tell, and I am still monumentally disappointed with it. Number 9, Death Wish. This movie was just boring. A movie with Bruce Willis running around trying to get revenge should be entertaining enough, but it ploddingly moves along from moment to moment, trying to make us care about Bruce Willis's family, why he's going around shooting guys. But unlike say Taken, which takes the time for us to know Brian Mills and his family's relationship, here we're just expected to give a crap without much work being put into developing any relationships. The original Charles Bronson film isn't a classic by any means, but it didn't deserve a half-assed remake with Bruce Willis sleepwalking throughout it. Number 8, Game Over Man. The Workaholics crew is back together to make a riff on Die Hard. That should be fun enough, right? Sadly no. Adam Devine, Anders Holm, and Blake Anderson stumble their way through a comedy where all of the jokes feel forced and fall completely flat. What do they do to make up for it? An abundance of sorta celebrity cameos that only a handful of people are going to really recognize. This movie is a prime example of the issue with many Netflix films, where movies have just been rushed into production without a great deal of thought put into making the script sharper, and it also doesn't help that the film just looks cheap when it definitely wasn't. And look, as long as a film like this can still make you laugh, it can get away with being mediocre. Sadly, it just wasn't funny. Number 7, The Equalizer 2. This is probably the most disappointing film of 2018 for me. I really dug the first Equalizer film, pairing Denzel with director Anton Fuqua to make a solid action thriller that fit in with a crop of retired dude action movies like John Wick or Taken. This movie tries to follow the path of the old TV show, featuring multiple people that Robert McCall helps out. Except rather than making this film feel like an expansion of the first film, it just leaves the film stumbling for about 40 minutes as it tries to figure out what the plot is. And by the time that the actual plot with Pedro Pascal actually kicks in, we're just left wanting for the film to be over and done with. Very disappointing. Number 6, The Happy Time Murders. Happy Time Murders could have done for Muppets what Team America did for Marionettes. The trailers had been fairly entertaining, and just the premise of foul-mouthed Muppets was enough to get me interested, in addition to it being directed by the son of Jim Henson. But instead it winds up being a poor attempt at a raunchy Who Framed Roger Rabbit. The jokes are pretty painful to sit through. Despite Melissa McCarthy's best attempts at trying to make something work with the material, there's no attempt at being anything more than a very by-the-numbers, cliche detective story that happens to feature some Muppets. And the jokes that do make use of the raunchy Muppets concept just come across as lazy and half-assed. Again, wasted potential here. Number 5, Winchester. Winchester should have been an awesome haunted house film. The Spielberg brothers have directed some solid movies in the past, particularly Predestination with Ethan Hawke. So when you hear they convinced Helen Mirren of all people to star in a horror movie based on a very interesting real-life location and person, then that's sure to get your attention. Unfortunately, Winchester is never sure if it wants to be your more conventional horror film with predictable jump scares, or a film that offers some insight into a real-life location. Rather than being the next Conjuring film, we're just left with a film that doesn't really know what it wants to be, and comes across as a missed opportunity. Number 4, Slender Man. This movie is about 6 years too late. Slender Man was an internet meme that had captured the attention of people online back in 2012, spawning some really cool short films and video games based on the character, treating him as the urban myth he was portrayed as on the internet. In 2018, Slender Man just doesn't have that level of interest that he would have had a few years ago, and making this film PG-13 prevented the film from making any real scares or effort with horror fans. We now know that the studio and production company clashed over the production of this film, which led to it being reworked and mismanaged, which is why it is riddled with continuity and plot issues. On top of this movie follows every dumb, low-budget horror cliche you can think of, with a group of kids summoning an evil entity and then trying to figure out how to stop it, leading to some absolutely idiotic character decisions. If you are wanting an interesting Slender Man film, go check out the dozens of short films that exist on YouTube. Number 3, The Cloverfield Paradox. Oh boy, I'm sure you knew this was coming. Netflix stunned the world when this this film was revealed at the 2018 Super Bowl, with the trailer saying that the movie would be available immediately after the big game. This marketing strategy shook everyone. Suddenly, you didn't need to spend millions of dollars over months and months trying to build up hype for your film. Instead, you could surprise everyone, and what a marketing tactic it was, because boy did people realize this movie wasn't very good once they watched it. Cloverfield fans were just hoping it would fill in some gaps to the Cloverfield mythos, which they kind of got thanks to some scenes clearly shot separately from the rest of the space-based scenes. You can tell that this was a completely different movie before the Cloverfield logo was slapped onto it. The movie jumps around, not sure if it wants to be an Alien ripoff or not, with some major gaps in logic in how it presents its science. This movie may have changed how movies can be marketed, but not much else. Number 2, Holmes and Watson. Now, I've been a fan of Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly for a long time. I love Step Brothers and Talladega Nights. Whenever Will Ferrell is completely invested in writing the comedy, working the jokes, he can churn out gold like Anchorman. But even I've got to say, this movie is shocking. Even I couldn't believe how painfully unfunny this was. And I'm someone who didn't mind the trailers. The movie is one idiotic decision after another, with absolutely nothing making sense by the end of it. Suddenly, you've got Charlie Chaplin and Albert Einstein sharing the time with Sherlock as he boards the Titanic. But rather than owning these absurdities for comedy like a Monty Python sketch would, Holmes and Watson comes across as a film that has no idea what it's doing. Considering this movie has been outright rejected by audiences and critics alike, safe to say the sooner that this movie is forgotten, the better. And number 1, Robin Hood. This is without a doubt the worst film that I've seen all of 2018, and genuinely wish I could get the 2 hours of my life back that I spent watching this, not knowing whether it wants to be a historical action film or a rip-off of Arrow. This movie holds your attention for about a minute as it tries to explain a new take on Robin Hood's origin, but soon after the movie just falls apart, with obscene design choices that try to bring a modern aesthetic to the time of the Third Crusade, which comes across as incredibly off-putting and jarring. Robin Hood so desperately wants to be treated as a big superhero film that rather than stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, it just steals you of your time and gives you a turd. You know this movie is bad when Jamie Foxx just vanishes for a chunk of the film. I just hope Taron Egerton is able to find a film that helps him branch out from just being the guy from Kingsman, because this movie just isn't it. Thank you again for another year of being with the Mono Report. If you would like to see my complete ranking of 2018 films, be sure to check out the Letterboxd link in the description below. Here's hoping for a big and wonderful year of film in 2019. Thank you for watching, guys. If you want to see more just like this, be sure to stay right here for your money fix. Bye guys.